We ain't animals." The 10-year-old girl slapped the farmer's hand away from her brother. "You don't get to pick us apart like cattle." The auction platform shook. Snow fell on 5 children standing shoulder to shoulder, the youngest clutching a ragged blanket, the oldest ready to fight grown men with her bare fists. Nobody in that Wyoming crowd wanted them. Too many. Too broken. Too much trouble. Then bootstraps. Heavy. Deliberate. Coming closer. Before we begin this journey, I invite you to subscribe and stay until the very end. If this story touches your heart, comment with your city so I can see how far it travels. $5 for those boys. The farmer grabbed Sam's arm. "I'll take these 2. Leave the girls." Clara's fist connected with his wrist before her mind caught up. "Get your hands off him." The farmer stumbled back, shock twisting into rage. "Why, you little... Touch my brother again and I'll break your fingers." She meant it. Every word. 10 years old, 90 pounds soaking wet. And Clara Mae Dawson would have fought every man in that crowd if it meant keeping her family together. Sam pressed against her back, shaking. Tommy was crying somewhere behind her. Josie had gone silent, the dangerous kind of silent that meant she was about to bolt. And Emmy. Emmy just watched with those gray eyes that saw too much. "Control that child," the farmer snarled at Reverend Cutter, "or I'll do it myself." Cutter stepped forward, his black coat pristine against the falling snow. His smile made Clara's skin crawl. "Now, Clara Mae, we've discussed this behavior before. We stay together, all 5 of us." "That's not how this works, child. You're orphans. You go where you're placed. Then place us together or don't place us at all." Cutter's smile tightened. He turned to the crowd, spreading his hands like a preacher at Sunday service. "As you can see, the girl has spirit. Misguided, of course. These children aren't actually siblings, just strays who traveled on the same train. There's no reason they need to remain together." "We're family," Clara said. "You're nothing." Cutter's voice dropped the pastoral sweetness. "You're unwanted children that nobody claimed. Merchandise that hasn't sold. That's what you are." Tommy's wail cut through the wind. 5 years old, clutching his blanket, crying the way only a child who'd lost everything could cry. "Mama! I want Mama!" Clara's heart cracked. Tommy's mother had been dead for 2 years. He still called for her in his sleep. "Shh, Tommy. I'm here." Josie wrapped her arms around the little boy, pulling him close. "It's okay. Clara's gonna fix it." Clara wished she had Josie's faith. $10 for the boys." Another farmer pushed forward. "They look strong enough. I'll work the softness out of them quick." "The girls, too," a woman called. "I need kitchen help. The blonde one looks healthy." 15 for just the oldest boy. 20 for... "Stop!" Clara screamed it. "Stop! Stop! Stop! We're not for sale. We're people. We're..." Cutter's hand clamped over her mouth. "Enough!" His fingers dug into her jaw. "One more outburst, and you go in the wagon. Alone. Understand?" Clara bit him. Cutter yanked his hand back with a curse, blood welling from the bite mark. His face contorted not with pain but with fury. "You little savage!" He raised his hand. Clara didn't flinch. She'd been hit before. By orphanage matrons. By prospective families who decided she was too much trouble. By men who thought children should be silent and grateful for whatever scraps they received. She braced for the blow. It never came. A hand caught Cutter's wrist mid-swing. Large, calloused, strong enough to stop the Reverend's arm like it was nothing. "That's enough." Clara looked up. The man was tall, weathered. Maybe 40, maybe older, hard to tell with the snow in his dark hair and the shadows under his gray eyes. He wore a rancher's coat, well made but worn, and he held Cutter's wrist with the casual grip of someone who could break it without much effort. Mr. Harlan. Cutter's voice went oily smooth. I didn't see you there. Clearly. The man Harlan released Cutter's wrist. You make a habit of hitting children, Reverend. The girl bit me, drew blood. Seems like she had cause. Cutter's face reddened. These orphans are my responsibility. How I discipline them is my concern. Not anymore. The words dropped into the crowd like stones into still water. I'm sorry. Cutter blinked. I'm taking them. Harlan's gaze swept over the 5 children. All of them. Clara's breath caught. Behind her, she heard Josie's sharp intake of air, Sam's confused whimper, Tommy's crying stuttering into hiccups. Mr. Harlan, surely you're joking. Cutter forced a laugh. You taking in children. 5 of them. Do I look like I'm joking? He didn't. He looked like a man carved from the same granite as the mountains, cold and immovable and absolutely serious. You're a bachelor, Cutter pressed. No wife, no experience with children. The placement committee would never approve. How much? I beg your pardon. How much for all 5? Name your price. The crowd had gone completely silent. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Cutter's expression shifted. Clara watched greed war with outrage and win. Well, there are fees, of course. Transportation costs, documentation. The standard placement fee is $10 per child, but given the circumstances, he paused, calculating. $200 for all 5. Someone in the crowd gasped. $200 was a fortune, more than most families saw in a year. Harlan reached into his coat. Wait. Clara found her voice. Wait, you can't just... He pulled out a leather wallet, counted bills with steady hands, and pressed them into Cutter's palm. 200, plus 50 for your trouble. His eyes met Cutter's. And for any paperwork that might cause problems to disappear. Cutter's fingers closed around the money. A pleasure doing business, Mr. Harlan? It's not business. Harlan turned to Clara. It's family. He extended his hand toward her, palm up, an offering. Clara stared at it. What do you want? She demanded. To take you somewhere warm. Why? Because it's cold and you're shivering. That's not an answer. No, he agreed. It's not. But it's all I've got right now. Come with me and I'll explain on the way. Or stay here and let the Reverend auction you off piece by piece. Your choice. Clara's mind raced. This was wrong. This was a trick. Rich men didn't buy orphans out of kindness. They bought them for labor, for show, for worse things she'd heard whispered about in the orphanage dormitories. But the alternative was watching Sam get dragged away. Watching her family torn apart. Watching everything she'd fought for dissolve like snow in spring. Clara! Sam's hand found hers. I'm scared. She looked at her brother, 8 years old, too thin, eyes that used to sparkle before their parents died. She looked at Josie, still holding Tommy, both of them watching her with desperate hope. She looked at Emmy, silent Emmy, who never asked for anything because she'd learned early that asking led to disappointment. They needed her to decide, right now, in this moment. Clara took Harlan's hand. His grip was firm but gentle, warm despite the cold. Smart girl, he said quietly. Let's get you all out of this snow. The wagon was covered, thank God. Canvas stretched over wooden hoops, blocking the worst of the wind. Harlan lifted Tommy first, then Josie, then Sam. Emmy climbed in herself before anyone could offer help. Clara hesitated at the wagon's edge. Second thoughts, Harlan asked. About 100 of them. She studied his face, searching for any sign of what he really wanted. You just spent $250 on 5 children you've never met. That's insane. Probably. People don't do that. Some do. Why? Harlan was quiet for a moment. Snow gathered on the brim of his hat, on the shoulders of his coat. 25 years ago, he said finally, I had a brother. Daniel. He was 12. Clara waited. There was a storm. Worse than this one. We got separated from our folks, lost in the snow. Harlan's jaw tightened. I was 15, old enough to know better, old enough to save him. What happened? I didn't. The words hung in the frozen air between them. By the time I found help, Daniel was gone, frozen, 10 feet from a line shack I didn't know was there. Harlan's voice was steady, but something in his eyes broke through the stone. I've spent 25 years wondering what would have happened if someone had helped us, if someone had seen 2 kids in trouble and done something. So we're your redemption. Maybe. Or maybe you're just 5 kids who need a home, and I'm just a man with too much house and not enough people in it. He offered his hand again to help her up. Does the reason matter if the result is the same? Clara thought about that. About all the reasons people had given for taking orphans free labor tax benefits, showing off their Christian charity. None of those reasons had made the placements better or worse. What mattered was what happened after. I suppose not, she said. She took his hand and climbed into the wagon. The ranch was 20 miles north. 20 miles of frozen road, howling wind and snow, thick enough to erase the world. Clara sat at the front with Harlan watching him drive. Behind them, her siblings had burrowed into blankets like hibernating animals. Tommy had finally stopped crying, exhausted into sleep. Josie hummed softly some melody their mother used to sing. Sam hadn't spoken since leaving the auction, and Emmy sat apart from everyone watching the white landscape with those unsettling gray eyes. The little one, Harlan said after a long silence. The dark-haired girl. What's her story? Emmy. Clara glanced back. She doesn't have one. Or she does, but she won't tell it. We found her at the orphanage about a year ago. Somebody left her on the doorstep like a package. She doesn't talk much. She doesn't trust much. Neither do I. Fair enough. Harlan clicked the reins, urging the horses faster. The storm's getting worse. We need to make time. Clara pulled her thin coat tighter. Even with the canvas cover, the cold seeped in, gnawed at her bones. Here. Harlan shrugged off his leather coat and draped it around her shoulders. Can't have you freezing before we get there. What about you? I'm used to it. The coat was heavy, warm. It smelled like leather and horses and something else, tobacco maybe, or wood smoke. It smelled like safety. Clara hated how much she wanted to bury herself in it. Can I ask you something? She said. You seem to ask a lot of questions. Is that a problem? No, means you're thinking. I'd rather have that than blind obedience. Clara filed that away. Useful information about this strange man who'd bought 5 orphans like they were worth something. At the auction, she said slowly, when Cutter was about to hit me. You stopped him. I did. You didn't have to. I know. Why? Harlan was quiet for a moment. The horses trudged through deepening snow, their breath steaming in the cold. When I was 15, he said finally. After Daniel died, I spent a lot of years being angry, at God, at my parents, at myself, at everyone who didn't help when they could have. And somewhere along the way I realized the anger wasn't hurting anyone but me. So I made a choice. Every time I see someone about to get hurt, someone I can help, I help. Doesn't matter who they are or what they've done. I help because nobody helped Daniel. Clara absorbed this. It was, she decided, either the most honest thing an adult had ever told her or the most elaborate lie. Time would tell which. I'm not going to trust you, she said bluntly. Not yet. Maybe not ever. I've trusted people before, and it's never ended well. That's fine. It doesn't bother you. Why would it? Trust has to be earned. I haven't earned anything from you except suspicion. Harlan glanced at her sideways. Give me time, Clara Mae Dawson. I'll prove myself or I won't. Either way, you and your family have a roof over your heads and food in your bellies tonight. That's more than you had this morning. It was. She couldn't argue with that. They rode on in silence. Clara. The voice was soft. Sam crawling up from the wagon bed to wedge himself between her and Harlan. What is it? Is this man gonna keep us? Clara looked at Harlan. He looked back, waiting for her answer. I don't know yet, she said honestly. He has sad eyes. Sam studied Harlan with the uncomfortable directness of children. Like Papa did, after the factory hurt him, before he died. Harlan's expression flickered. Something crossed his face, pain maybe, or recognition. Your papa worked in a factory, he asked Sam. Sam nodded. He printed newspapers. The machine got him. It was loud and there was blood and Mama screamed and screamed and… Sam. Clara pulled her brother close. You don't have to talk about it. I want to. Sam's voice was small but determined. Because if he knows about Papa, maybe he'll understand why I'm scared of loud noises. And why Clara gets angry when people grab us. And why Tommy can't sleep without his blanket. Harlan was quiet for a long moment. Sam, he said finally, I'm not going to pretend I understand everything you've been through. But I know what it's like to lose family. I know what it's like to carry that loss around like a stone in your chest. And I know that sometimes the only thing that helps is finding new people to carry it with you. Are you going to be one of those people? I'm going to try. Sam considered this with 8-year-old solemnity. Then he nodded once and crawled back to rejoin the others. Clara watched him go. He's braver than me, she murmured. He's not. Harlan kept his eyes on the road. He just has you to be brave for him. That's different. The first sign of the ranch appeared through the swirling snow, a massive wooden arch with Harlan burned into the timber. That's us, Harlan said. Welcome home. Home. The word stuck in Clara's throat. What emerged from the storm was bigger than anything she'd imagined. A 3-story house of timber and stone windows glowing against the gray afternoon. Smoke from 2 chimneys. Barns and stables stretching into the white distance. You own all this, she breathed. 12,000 acres. That's impossible. One man can't own that much. One man can own whatever he can hold on to. Harlan guided the horses toward the house. My father started with 500 acres in a dream. I turned it into this. And now… He paused. Now I've got no one to leave it to. Before Clara could respond, the front door burst open. A woman in her late 50s strode onto the porch, wrapped in a thick shawl, her face tight with worry. Nathaniel Harlan. Where have you been? The storm's getting worse by the minute, and Dan's been worried sick about the cattle, and… She stopped dead. Are those children? They are. Harlan jumped down from the wagon. Mrs. Whitmore, meet Clara, Sam, Josie, Tommy, and Emmy. They're staying with us. Staying with… Mrs. Whitmore's mouth opened and closed. Nathaniel, you can't just… This isn't… There are procedures. Procedures are done. Right now they need warmth, food, and beds. Harlan was already lifting Tommy from the wagon bed. Everything else can wait till morning. Mrs. Whitmore looked at the children. Really looked. At their thin faces and threadbare clothes. At Tommy's clutched blanket and Josie's tear-stained cheeks. At Sam pressed against Clara's side, and Emmy standing apart, watching everything with those ancient gray eyes. Something in the older woman's expression shifted. Well, she said briskly, don't just stand there in the cold. Inside. All of you. I'll put on soup. The interior of the house hit Clara like a physical force. Warmth. Real warmth, seeping into bones that had forgotten what it meant to be warm. She stood in the entrance hall, dripping snowmelt onto floors that probably cost more than her father had made in a year, and tried to breathe. Don't touch nothing, she hissed at Tommy, who was reaching for a porcelain vase. Everything can be touched. Harlan had appeared beside them, silent as a ghost. Everything can be broken. Things get replaced. Children don't understand. Clara didn't know how to respond to that. Mrs. Whitmore swept through like a force of nature, gathering children and issuing orders. Hot baths, clean clothes, soup in the kitchen. Move, move, move. The next 2 hours blurred together. Water so warm it stung. Night clothes that smelled like lavender instead of mold. Soup thick with vegetables and meat served in a kitchen bigger than the entire dormitory Clara had shared with 11 other girls. Tommy fell asleep at the table, his face nearly in his bowl. Josie ate and ate and ate like she was afraid the food might disappear. Sam pushed his soup around without tasting it. Emmy ate nothing, just watched. And Clara? Clara watched Harlan. He sat at the head of the table, nursing coffee, saying little. But his eyes moved constantly, checking each child, noting who needed more food, who was struggling, who was scared. "You're staring," he said without looking at her. "You're confusing." "How so?" "You bought 5 orphans, brought us to your fancy ranch, and now you're just sitting there, drinking coffee, like it's normal." "It's not normal." Harlan finally met her eyes. "Nothing about today has been normal. But I figure we've all had enough drama for one day. Sometimes the best thing you can do is just be quiet. Let people breathe." Clara considered this. "I don't trust you," she said again. "I know. I'm going to watch you, every minute. If you do anything to hurt my family, I'll make you regret it." Harlan nodded slowly. "Fair enough. You're not scared of a 10-year-old girl threatening you." "I'm terrified." He didn't smile, but something shifted in his eyes. "Because I think you mean it. And I think if I give you cause, you'd find a way to make good on that threat." "I would." "Then I'd better not give you cause." He stood, draining his coffee. "Mrs. Whitmore will show you to your rooms. Get some sleep. Tomorrow we'll figure out the rest." He walked out without another word. Clara watched him go, this strange man who'd upended her entire world with a handful of money and a single word, family. She still didn't trust him. But for the first time in 2 years, she wanted to. The bedroom was bigger than any room Clara had ever slept in. 2 beds, real beds with thick mattresses and quilts that smelled like cedar. A window overlooking the snow-covered land. A dresser with an actual mirror. Josie and Emmy were already in one bed, curled together despite the space. Tommy had insisted on staying with Sam in the next room. Clara had checked on them twice already, both boys asleep. Tommy's blanket clutched tight. Sam's face finally peaceful. Now she stood at the window, watching the storm rage outside. "You can't sleep either." Emmy's voice soft and sudden. Clara turned. The younger girl was sitting up in bed, her dark hair loose around her pale face. "How'd you know?" "You breathe different when you're awake." Emmy pulled her knees to her chest. "You're scared." "I'm not." Clara stopped. What was the point of lying? "Yeah, I'm scared." "Of what?" "Everything. That this is a trick. That he'll change his mind. That we'll wake up tomorrow and be back on that platform." Emmy was quiet for a long moment. "He won't send us back," she said finally. "How do you know?" "Because he looks at us the way Mama used to look at me." Emmy's voice was matter-of-fact. "Like we're important. Like we matter." Clara crossed to the bed, sat on the edge. "You remember your Mama?" "Sometimes. In pieces." Emmy pulled the quilt tighter. "She had dark hair. And gray eyes. Like mine. Like his." "Like whose?" "The man. Mr. Harlan." Emmy met Clara's gaze. "He looks like someone I used to know. I can't remember who." A chill ran down Clara's spine that had nothing to do with the cold. "Emmy, I'm sure it's just a coincidence." "Maybe." But Emmy didn't sound convinced. "Clara." "Yeah. I think we're supposed to be here. I think he was supposed to find us." Clara wanted to argue. Wanted to explain that the world didn't work that way. that there was no such thing as fate or destiny, that they were just 5 unlucky kids who'd caught one lucky break. But looking at Emmy's gray eyes, so much like Harlan's, now that she noticed, she couldn't form the words. "Go to sleep," she said instead. "Whatever's supposed to happen will happen. But right now, we need rest." Emmy nodded and lay back down, closing her eyes. Clara returned to the window. Downstairs, she heard voices. Harlan and Mrs. Whitmore talking softly. "You've lost your mind, Nathaniel." "Probably." 5 children. 5. What are you going to do with 5 children? "Raise them. If they'll let me." "You don't know the first thing about raising children." "Then I'll learn." A long pause. "This is about Daniel, isn't it?" Mrs. Whitmore's voice gentled. "You think you can make up for what happened by saving these strays?" "Maybe I do. Is that so wrong?" "It's not wrong. It's just complicated. Those children are broken, Nathaniel. They've been hurt in ways we can't imagine. You can't fix that with money and good intentions." "I'm not trying to fix them." Harlan's voice dropped so low Clara had to strain to hear. "I'm trying to give them space to fix themselves. And maybe in the process, they'll help me fix whatever's broken in me too." Silence. "You're a fool," Mrs. Whitmore said finally. But there was warmth in it now. Affection. "Never claimed otherwise." Clara stepped back from the window. Her eyes burned, but she didn't cry. She'd learned long ago that tears were wasted effort. But something had shifted in her chest. Something she didn't quite understand. This man, this cold, quiet, broken man, had looked at 5 unwanted children and seen something worth saving. Not labor, not charity cases, not burdens to be distributed or separated or forgotten. He'd seen people. It didn't mean she trusted him. Trust was earned. But for the first time in 2 years, Clara Mae Dawson allowed herself to imagine a future that didn't end in disappointment. It was terrifying. It was also, she realized as she finally climbed into bed, the first step towards something that might someday feel like home. The first crack appeared 3 days later. Clara had been waiting for it. Good things didn't last, she knew that better than anyone. So when the screaming started at 2 in the morning, she was almost relieved. Finally, the other shoe was dropping. She was out of bed before her mind fully woke, racing down the hall toward the boys' room. Tommy's wails echoed through the house, raw and terrified, the kind of screaming that came from somewhere deeper than nightmares. "Fire, fire! Mama, there's fire!" Clara burst through the door. Tommy was thrashing in his bed, tangled in blankets, eyes wide open, but seeing nothing. Sam crouched in the corner, hands over his ears, rocking back and forth. "Tommy," Clara grabbed his shoulders. "Tommy, wake up! There's no fire! You're safe!" "It's burning. Everything's burning. I can smell it. I can smell—" "There's no fire." She pulled him against her chest, held him tight. "Shh. Shh. I've got you. You're at the ranch. Remember Mr. Harlan's ranch. We're safe." Footsteps thundered in the hallway. Harlan appeared in the doorway. Hair disheveled, shirt half-buttoned. Behind him, Mrs. Whitmore clutched a candle, her face pale. "What happened?" Harlan's voice was rough with sleep. "Night terror." Clara didn't look up. "He gets them sometimes. About the fire that killed his family." Tommy was still sobbing, but the screaming had stopped. His small body shook against Clara's chest. "I want Mama," he whimpered. "I want to go home." "I know, baby. I know." Harlan stepped into the room, moving slowly, carefully. He knelt beside Clara and Tommy, keeping his distance, but close enough to help if needed. "Hey, little man." His voice was gentler than Clara had ever heard it. "Rough night, huh?" Tommy peeked out from Clara's arms. His face was wet with tears and snot, his eyes red and swollen. "I saw the fire," he whispered. "It was eating everything." "I know, fires are scary." Harlan reached out, hesitated, then gently touched Tommy's shoulder. "But you know what's good about fires." Tommy shook his head. "They go out. Every fire, no matter how big, eventually goes out. And then you rebuild. That's what people do. We rebuild." "But Mama didn't rebuild. She went away." Clara felt her heart crack clean in half. Harlan was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was thick. "You're right. Some people can't rebuild. And that's the hardest thing in the world to understand." He moved closer slowly, giving Tommy time to pull away if he wanted. "But you know what your mama would want." "What?" "She'd want you to rebuild. For her. She'd want you to grow up and be happy and live a good life. That's what mamas want for their babies." Tommy's lip trembled. "How do you know?" "Because that's what my mama wanted for me. And my brother Daniel, the one who died in the snow, that's what she wanted for him too." Harlan's voice caught slightly. "She told me after he was gone that the best way to honor him was to live well. To not let the fire or the snow or whatever took them win." Tommy considered this with the intense concentration of a 5-year-old processing impossible concepts. "So, if I'm happy," he said slowly, "Mama wins." "That's right. Mama wins." Something shifted in Tommy's face. Not happiness, he was too young and too broken for that, but something like understanding. "Okay," he said softly. "I'll try." That's all anyone can ask. Harlan stood, joints cracking. "Think you can go back to sleep?" Tommy looked at Clara, then at Sam, still huddled in the corner. "Can we all sleep together, in the big bed?" Clara glanced at Harlan. He nodded once. "I'll have Mrs. Whitmore bring extra blankets," he said. "You kids take my room. Bed's bigger." "We can't take your room," Clara protested. "You're not taking it. I'm giving it." Harlan was already moving toward the door. "I've got paperwork to catch up on anyway. Wasn't sleeping much." He left before Clara could argue further. Mrs. Whitmore appeared with an armful of quilts, her expression soft in a way Clara hadn't seen before. "Come on, children. Let's get you settled." They trooped down the hall to Harlan's room, all 5 of them, because Josie and Emmy had appeared at some point, drawn by the commotion. The bed was massive, big enough to hold all of them with room to spare. Tommy curled up in the middle, clutching his blanket. Sam pressed against Clara's back. Josie wrapped herself around Tommy like a protective shell. And Emmy lay at the edge, watching the ceiling with those gray eyes. "Clara." Josie's voice was muffled by quilts. "Yeah." "Is this what having a papa feels like?" Clara didn't know how to answer that. Their real papa had been gentle but distant, always working, always tired. He'd loved them, she knew that, but he'd never knelt beside them in the middle of the night to talk about fires going out and mamas winning. "I don't know," she said honestly. "Maybe. I think I like it." "Don't get used to it." But even as she said the words, Clara felt their hollowness. Something had shifted tonight. Something she couldn't name and didn't want to examine too closely. She closed her eyes and for the first time in years fell asleep without fear. Morning came gray and cold. Clara woke to find Tommy still curled against her, thumb in his mouth, a habit he'd broken months ago. The others were still sleeping, their breathing soft and even. She slipped out of bed carefully, not wanting to wake them, and padded downstairs in her borrowed nightgown. Harlan was in the kitchen, standing at the stove. The smell of bacon and coffee filled the air. "You cook?" Clara couldn't hide her surprise. "When I have to." He didn't turn around. "Mrs. Whitmore doesn't come in till 8. I've been making my own breakfast for 15 years. Clara hovered in the doorway, uncertain. This felt different from last night's crisis. More intimate somehow. More dangerous. "Thank you," she said finally. "For what you did with Tommy." "Didn't do anything special." "You did." Clara forced the words out. "Nobody's ever talked to him like that. Like his feelings mattered. Like his mama mattered." Harlan was quiet for a long moment. Then he turned spatula in hand and looked at her directly. Every person's feelings matter, Clara, even little ones, especially little ones. He turned back to the stove. You hungry? I could eat. Then sit down. Bacon's almost ready. Clara sat at the big wooden table watching him work. He moved efficiently, comfortably, like a man who'd spent years in his own company. Can I ask you something? She said. You do that a lot. Is that a problem? No, just an observation. He slid bacon onto a plate, cracked eggs into the pan. Ask. Last night when you talked about your mama wanting you to live well, did she really say that? Harlan's hands stilled for just a moment. Then he resumed cooking. She did. Right before she died. Consumption took her about 3 years after Daniel. His voice was matter-of-fact, but Clara heard the pain underneath. She held my hand and told me that I'd spent too long grieving my brother. That Daniel would want me to be happy. That she wanted me to be happy. Were you happy? No. He plated the eggs, brought 2 servings to the table, sat down across from her. Not for a long time. I built this ranch because I didn't know what else to do. Threw myself into work because it was easier than feeling. Pushed everyone away because losing people hurt too much. What changed? Nothing. Harlan picked up his fork. Nothing changed. I just got tired of being miserable. And then you 5 showed up and I thought... He trailed off. Thought what? I thought maybe it wasn't too late to try again. To have something worth living for besides cattle and profit margins. Clara absorbed this. It was more than she'd expected. More honest, more vulnerable. That's a lot of pressure to put on 5 orphans, she said carefully. You're right. It is. Harlan met her eyes. And I'm sorry for that. You didn't ask to be anybody's salvation. You just needed a place to live. We need more than that. The words surprised her. She hadn't meant to say them. I know. Harlan set down his fork. You need someone who's going to show up. Every day. Not just when it's convenient or when there's a crisis. Someone who's going to learn your names and your fears and your dreams. Someone who's going to mess up and apologize and try again. Can you be that person? I don't know. His honesty was brutal. I've never been that person for anyone, but I'm going to try. That's all I can promise. Clara picked up her fork, took a bite of eggs. They were good. Better than anything she'd had at the orphanage. Okay, she said. Okay. Okay, I'll give you a chance. Not trust, not yet, but a chance. She pointed her fork at him. But if you hurt any of them, I'll make you regret it. You said that before. I meant it then. I mean it now. Something that might have been a smile flickered across Harlan's face. Understood. They ate in silence after that, but it was a different kind of silence. Easier, less guarded. The others trickled down one by one. Josie first, then Sam leading a still sleepy Tommy. Emmy came last, as always, watching everything with those unsettling gray eyes. Harlan made more eggs, more bacon. Mrs. Whitmore arrived and immediately took over, clucking about nutrition and proper meals and growing children needing their vegetables. It was, Clara realized with a start, almost like a family. The thought terrified her, but not as much as it had yesterday. After breakfast, Harlan announced he had work to do. The ranch didn't run itself, he said, and the storm had set them back 3 days. But he'd be back for dinner, and tomorrow he'd start showing them around properly. Clara watched him go, then turned to find Mrs. Whitmore studying her. What? Nothing. The older woman's expression was thoughtful. Just seeing something I didn't expect to see. What's that? Hope. Mrs. Whitmore handed her a dish towel. Now make yourself useful. Those dishes won't dry themselves. The day passed in a blur of activity. Mrs. Whitmore put them all to work, small tasks, age-appropriate, nothing that felt like punishment. Tommy helped sort buttons. Josie learned to fold napkins. Sam organized the pantry, counting cans with the intensity of someone who'd learned that knowing exactly how much food was available could mean the difference between hunger and survival. Emmy disappeared. Clara noticed her absence around midday and felt her heart stop. "Where's Emmy?" She grabbed Sam's arm. "When did you last see her?" "I don't know. Breakfast, maybe." Clara was already running for the door when Mrs. Whitmore stopped her. "She's in the barn." "What?" "I saw her slip out about an hour ago. She's been sitting with the horses." Relief flooded through Clara, followed immediately by anger. She can't just wander off. She could get lost or hurt or... She's fine. Mrs. Whitmore's voice was calm. "Let her be." "But... Clara!" The older woman placed a hand on her shoulder. "That child hasn't relaxed once since she got here. She watches everyone, catalogs every exit, sleeps with one eye open. Sound familiar?" Clara felt her face flush. If sitting with horses makes her feel safe, let her sit with horses. She'll come back when she's ready. Clara wanted to argue, wanted to run to the barn and drag Emmy back where she could see her, protect her, keep her safe. But Mrs. Whitmore was right. Emmy needed space. They all did. "Fine," Clara said through gritted teeth. "But if she's not back by dinner, then you can go get her. Deal?" "Deal." Emmy came back on her own about an hour before sunset. She slipped through the kitchen door like a shadow, her dark hair tangled with hay, her gray eyes brighter than Clara had ever seen them. "Where were you?" Clara demanded. "Barn. There's a horse. A gray one. She let me touch her." "You can't just disappear like that. I was worried." "I know." Emmy didn't apologize. "But I needed to think." "Think about what?" Emmy was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "About why this feels wrong." Clara's blood ran cold. "Wrong how?" "Not bad wrong. Just..." Emmy struggled for words. "Too right. Too easy. Things don't just get better. Not for kids like us." Clara sat down, pulling Emmy onto the chair beside her. "I know what you mean." "You do?" "Yeah. I keep waiting for something to go wrong, for him to change his mind, for all of this to disappear. What if it doesn't?" The question hung between them. "Then I guess we learn to live with good things happening," Clara said finally. "Even if it feels impossible." Emmy considered this. "That sounds hard." "Harder than the bad stuff sometimes." They sat in silence until Mrs. Whitmore called them for dinner. Harlan came back covered in snow and smelling like cattle. He stomped his boots on the porch, shook the white from his coat, and entered the kitchen looking exhausted but satisfied. "Storm's clearing," he announced. "Tomorrow we can start moving the herd to the winter pastures." "We?" Clara asked. "You want to learn ranch work?" "I want to learn everything." The words came out fiercer than she intended. "I'm not going to be useless. None of us are." Harlan looked at her for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. "All right. Tomorrow you ride with me. I'll teach you the basics." "What about the others?" "Sam can help Dan in the stables. He's my foreman. You'll meet him tomorrow. Josie and Tommy can assist Mrs. Whitmore here. And Emmy." He paused, glancing at the dark-haired girl who was watching him with those penetrating gray eyes. "Emmy can do whatever she wants. Barnhouse, wherever she feels comfortable." "You're not going to make her work." Clara was suspicious. "I'm not going to make any of you work. This isn't an orphanage. You're not here to earn your keep." Harlan sat down at the head of the table. "But if you want to learn, I'll teach you. If you want to help, I'll let you help. The choice is yours." It was Clara realized the first time in years that anyone had given her a choice about anything. Dinner was quieter than breakfast. Everyone was tired, the kind of bone-deep exhaustion that came from too much emotion packed into too few days. Tommy fell asleep before finishing his soup. Sam's eyes kept drooping. Even Josie's constant chatter had faded to occasional murmurs. Harlan carried Tommy to bed without being asked. Clara followed with the others, tucking them in one by one, checking windows and doors out of habit. When she finally returned downstairs, she found Harlan in the parlor, staring at a portrait above the fireplace. A man and a woman, stern-faced, formally posed. His parents, she guessed. "They look serious," she said, making him aware of her presence. They were serious people. Harlan didn't turn around. Built this ranch from nothing. Survived droughts, blizzards, raids. Lost 2 sons, Daniel to the cold, my older brother Robert to cholera when he was 3. You had another brother. I barely remember him. I was just a baby when he died. Harlan finally turned to face her. My mother used to say that losing children was the price of living in the West, that you had to keep going, keep building because stopping meant dying. That's harsh. It was honest. This land doesn't care about your feelings. It'll kill you just as soon as look at you. He gestured at the portrait. They survived by being hard, by not letting themselves get too attached to anything that could be taken away. Is that what you learned from them? It's what I practiced for 25 years. Harlan's voice softened. And it's what I'm trying to unlearn now. Clara moved closer to the fire, warming her hands. Why? Because being hard kept me alive, but it didn't let me live. He sat down heavily in one of the armchairs. I've got more money than I'll ever spend. More land than I can see in a day's ride. And until a week ago, I had no one to share any of it with. You had Mrs. Whitmore, Dan. Employees, friends maybe, but not family. Harlan looked at her directly. You asked me once why I really took you kids. The truth is I don't fully know. But part of it, a big part, was that I looked at you standing on that platform fighting for your siblings, refusing to let anyone tear you apart, and I thought, that's what I should have done for Daniel. That's who I should have been. You can't blame yourself for what happened to your brother. You were 15. Old enough to know better. Old enough to save him. Old enough to make mistakes. Clara sat down across from him. Trust me, I know about blaming yourself for things you couldn't control. My papa died because his factory had broken machines they never fixed. My mama died because we couldn't afford a doctor. None of that was my fault, but I spent a long time thinking it was. What changed? Nothing. I just got tired of carrying it. She smiled slightly. Sound familiar? Harlan's expression flickered. Using my own words against me. If they're good words, why not? He almost laughed. Almost. You're a piece of work, Clara Mae Dawson. I've been told. They sat in comfortable silence, the fire crackling between them. Can I ask you something? Clara said finally. You're going to ask whether I say yes or not. Probably. She hesitated. Emmy said something strange today, about you looking like someone she used to know. And last night she said you look at us like her mama used to look at her. Harlan's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his eyes. And I keep thinking about how she won't tell anyone where she came from. How she just appeared at the orphanage one day, no papers, no history, no nothing. Clara leaned forward. Her eyes are gray, like yours. Her hair is dark, like yours. And there's something about her face. Clara, I'm not accusing you of anything. I just want to know if there's something you're not telling us. Harlan was quiet for a long, tense moment. My brother Daniel, he said slowly. He had a sweetheart, before he died, a girl from the Shoshone tribe. Their family wintered near our property. Clara's heart began to pound. He never told our parents, they wouldn't have approved, but I knew. I saw them together once down by the creek. Harlan's voice was distant, remembering. After Daniel died, her family moved away. I never saw her again. Never knew what happened to her. You think Emmy might be? I don't know. He cut her off. I don't know, and I can't know, and I'm not going to get that child's hopes up based on a hunch and some gray eyes. But if she's family, she's already family. Harlan's voice was firm. All 5 of you are. It doesn't matter whose blood runs in whose veins. I chose you. You're mine now. That's what matters. Clara wanted to push, wanted to demand answers, but she saw something in Harlan's face, fear maybe, or hope, too fragile to examine closely, and she held her tongue. Okay, she said softly. But someday, if Emmy wants to know where she came from, we'll find out together. I promise. He stood suddenly, looking every one of his 40-odd years. But tonight, you need sleep. We've got a long day tomorrow. Clara stood too. At the doorway, she paused. Mr. Harlan. Call me Nate. Mr. Harlan was my father. Nate. The name felt strange in her mouth. Thank you. For everything. For Tommy last night. For giving Emmy space. For trying. He nodded once, that small acknowledgement she was beginning to recognize as his version of "you're welcome." Clara climbed the stairs, her mind churning with questions she couldn't answer. Emmy's mysterious past, Nate's dead brother, the possibility that this family they were building might be connected by more than circumstance. But those were problems for another day. Tonight her siblings were safe, warm, fed. For now that was enough. In her room she found Josie already asleep, curled around a pillow like it might run away. Emmy lay on the far side of the bed, eyes open, watching Clara in the darkness. You talked to him, Emmy said softly. About me. How do you know? I heard. Sound carries in old houses. Clara climbed into bed, settling between her sisters. Are you angry? No. Emmy was quiet for a moment. Do you think it's true that I might be connected to his brother? I don't know. Does it matter? Emmy considered this with the seriousness of a child forced to grow up too fast. I want to belong somewhere, to someone. I'm tired of being nobody from nowhere. You're not nobody. Clara reached out, found Emmy's hand in the darkness. You're my sister. Maybe not by blood, but by choice. That's what Nate said. We're family, because we chose each other. Is that enough? It has to be. Clara squeezed her hand. Because right now, it's all we've got. Emmy was silent for so long that Clara thought she'd fallen asleep. Then, barely above a whisper, I think I like him. Nate. I think he's good. I think so too. Does that scare you? Terrifies me. Good. Emmy's voice held something that might have been a smile. I thought I was the only one. They lay together in the darkness, 3 girls who'd survived the unsurvivable, holding on to each other against a world that had tried to break them. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new fears, new opportunities to trust or be betrayed. But tonight, they were safe. And for the first time, in longer than any of them could remember, that safety didn't feel like a lie. The trouble came on a Sunday, wrapped in black cloth and righteous fury. Clara saw the wagon approaching from the kitchen window where she'd been helping Mrs. Whitmore knead bread. 2 weeks had passed since the auction. 2 weeks of learning ranch work, of settling into routines, of slowly, carefully beginning to believe that maybe this could last. She should have known better. Someone's coming, she said, her hands stilling in the dough. Mrs. Whitmore looked up, squinted through the frost-covered glass, and went pale. Get the children upstairs. Why, who is it? Just do it, now. Clara didn't argue. She'd learned to recognize danger in adult voices, and Mrs. Whitmore's tone screamed it. She wiped her hands on her apron and ran. Sam and Tommy were in the parlor playing with wooden blocks Nate had carved for them. Josie was reading by the fire. She'd discovered Nate's library and hadn't left it since. Emmy, as usual, was nowhere to be seen. Upstairs, Clara ordered. All of you, now. Why? Josie looked up from her book. What's wrong? I don't know yet. Just go. Sam grabbed Tommy's hand without question. They'd done this before, fled from trouble, hidden from danger. The instinct was burned into their bones. Josie hesitated. Clara. Go." They went. Clara turned back toward the kitchen just as the front door burst open. Reverend Jonas Cutter stood in the entrance hall, snow swirling around him like a cloak. Behind him were two men Clara didn't recognize. Big men, hard-faced with the look of hired muscle. "Where is Nathaniel Harlan?" Cutter's voice was silk over steel. "He's not here." Clara planted herself in the hallway, blocking the path to the stairs. "He's working the cattle. Won't be back till evening." "Perfect." Cutter's smile made her skin crawl. "Then we'll take the children and be gone before he returns." Clara's blood turned to ice. "You can't do that." "I can and I will." Cutter reached into his coat, pulled out a folded document. "This is a court order from Judge Whitfield in Helena. It declares Nathaniel Harlan's guardianship null and void and remands all 5 children to my custody pending a formal hearing." "You're lying." "I assure you, I am not." Cutter stepped closer, his eyes cold. "Mr. Harlan may have bought you with money, but he cannot buy legitimacy. A single man living alone with no wife and no experience raising children. The territorial court takes a dim view of such arrangements. He's been good to us." Clara's voice shook, but she held her ground. "Better than anyone." "I'm sure he has. But goodness is not the issue. Propriety is. Legality is." Cutter tucked the document back into his coat. "Now gather your siblings and come quietly. I'd hate for this to become unpleasant." "I'm not going anywhere with you." The first man moved, fast, brutal, grabbing Clara's arm and wrenching it behind her back. Pain shot through her shoulder, but she didn't cry out. Wouldn't give them the satisfaction. "Let her go." Emmy's voice, sharp and cold, cut through the entrance hall. Clara twisted her head to see Emmy standing at the top of the stairs, Sam and Tommy behind her, Josie clutching the railing with white knuckles. Emmy held a kitchen knife. "Well, well." Cutter's smile widened. "The silent one speaks, and with such dramatic flair." "Let my sister go," Emmy repeated, "or I'll cut you." "You're 6 years old, child. Put down the knife before you hurt yourself." Emmy descended the stairs slowly, deliberately, the knife held steady in her small hand. Her gray eyes never left Cutter's face. "I've hurt people before," she said quietly. "When they tried to take me places, I didn't want to go. The man at the orphanage, the one who liked to visit the girls' dormitory at night, he doesn't have all his fingers anymore." Clara felt the grip on her arm loosen slightly. The man holding her was looking at Emmy with something approaching unease. "You're bluffing," Cutter said, but his voice had lost some of its confidence. "Try me." The standoff stretched tension thick enough to choke on. Clara's mind raced. Where was Nate? Where was Dan? Where was anyone who could help? The front door opened again. "What in the hell is going on here?" The voice was female, sharp, commanding. Clara craned her neck to see a woman standing in the doorway, tall, auburn-haired, dressed in practical wool, with a rifle slung over her shoulder. "Mrs. Mercer." Cutter's tone cooled. "This doesn't concern you. A man breaking into my neighbor's home with hired thugs, I think it concerns me plenty." The woman, Kate Mercer. Clara remembered Nate mentioning her, stepped inside her hand resting on her rifle. "Let the girl go. Now. I have a court order. I don't care if you have a letter from God himself. You don't drag children out of their home in the middle of winter." Kate's eyes were ice. "Let her go." The man released Clara's arm. She stumbled forward, caught herself, immediately positioned herself between Cutter and the stairs. "This isn't over." Cutter said, his voice tight with barely contained rage. "The law is on my side. Those children belong in proper Christian custody, not with a godless bachelor who thinks he can buy whatever he wants. Then take it up with the courts, properly, through legal channels, not with strong-arm tactics and ambush." Kate raised her rifle slightly. "Now get out of this house before I decide you're trespassing and act accordingly." Cutter held her gaze for a long, poisonous moment. Then he turned on his heel and strode out, his men following. The door slammed behind them. Kate lowered her rifle, let out a long breath. Is everyone all right? Clara's legs gave out. She sat down hard on the floor, shaking so badly her teeth chattered. Clara! Emmy was beside her in an instant. The knife discarded her small hands, gripping Clara's shoulders. Clara, breathe. They're gone. Breathe. I'm okay. Clara wasn't okay. She was terrified and furious and sick with the knowledge of how close they'd come. I'm okay. Kate knelt beside them, her expression softening. You must be Clara. Nate's told me about you. He has. Says you're the bravest person he's ever met. Kate helped her to her feet. I'm starting to see why. The other children had crept downstairs. Tommy crying softly. Sam pale as death. Josie clutching her book like a shield. What's going to happen? Josie asked, her voice small. Are they going to take us away? Not if I have anything to say about it. Kate's jaw set. Let's get word to Nate, then we'll figure out our next move. Nate came home like a storm made flesh. Clara heard the horse before she saw it, hooves pounding frozen ground coming fast. Then the front door crashed open, and Nate was there, wild-eyed, breathing hard. Where are they? His voice was barely human. I'll kill them. I'll kill them all. They're gone. Kate stepped forward, hands raised. Nate, look at me. The children are safe. Everyone's okay. He put his hands on her. Nate's gaze found the bruise already forming on her arm. He put his hands on my daughter. My daughter. The words hit Clara like a physical blow. I'm fine, she managed. Emmy scared them off with a knife. Nate looked at Emmy, something flickering across his face, pride maybe, or fear. Show me the court order, he said, his voice still tight with barely controlled rage. He took it with him, but he said it was from Judge Whitfield in Helena. Whitfield. Nate's jaw clenched. That snake oil charlatan? Cutter must have bribed him. Can he do that? Sam asked. Can a judge just take us away? Nate knelt down, bringing himself to Sam's eye level. Listen to me, all of you. He waited until 5 pairs of eyes were fixed on him. Nobody is taking you anywhere. I don't care what papers they wave or what judges they've bought. You're my family. I will fight for you with everything I have. But what if you lose? Tommy's voice was barely a whisper. Nate's expression softened. Then I'll keep fighting. And when I'm done fighting, I'll find another way. I'm not giving up on you. Not ever. Do you understand? Tommy nodded, tears streaming down his face. Good. Nate stood, turned to Kate. I need to get to Helena. Talk to a real judge. Get this thrown out. In this weather, the passes are barely open. I don't care. Nate. Kate gripped his arm. Think. If you leave now, you leave these children unprotected. Cutter could come back with more men, more legal papers, more. Then what do you suggest? Send Dan to Helena. He knows the territory better than anyone. You stay here, protect your family, and we'll gather support from the town. The town? Nate laughed bitterly. The town that's been calling me crazy for taking in 5 orphans. The town that crosses the street to avoid us. Not everyone. Kate's voice was firm. There are good people here, Nate. People who remember what it's like to need help and not get it. Let me talk to them. Clara watched the exchange, her mind racing. Kate Mercer spoke to Nate like an equal, challenged him without fear. And the way he looked at her. Fine. Nate ran a hand through his hair. Dan goes to Helena tomorrow. You work on the town, and I... You stay with your children, Kate finished. Where you belong. After Kate left, Nate gathered them all in the parlor. A fire crackled in the hearth, casting dancing shadows on the walls. Mrs. Whitmore brought hot chocolate, a luxury Clara had never tasted before coming here, and they sat in a circle like a war council of children and one battered rancher. I need you to tell me exactly what happened, Nate said. Every detail. Leave nothing out. Clara told it. The arrival Cutter's words, the court order, the man grabbing her arm. She told it flat and factual, The way you reported battlefield casualties. When she got to Emmy and the knife, Nate turned to the youngest girl. Emmy, is it true what you said about the man at the orphanage? Emmy nodded once. Why didn't you tell anyone? Who would I tell? Emmy's voice was soft. Nobody believed orphans. We were just things, to be used however people wanted. The silence that followed was deafening. I'm sorry. Nate's voice cracked. I'm sorry that happened to you. All of you. You deserved better. It's not your fault, Clara said. No, but I can make sure it never happens again. He looked at each of them in turn. From now on, nobody goes anywhere alone. We stay together, watch out for each other. If Cutter or anyone else comes here again, you run. Hide. Make noise. Whatever it takes to survive until help comes. What if help doesn't come? Sam asked. Help will always come. Nate's voice was fierce. Because I will always come, no matter what. Do you believe me? Sam looked at Clara. Clara looked at Emmy. Emmy looked at Josie. Josie looked at Tommy. Some silent communication passed between them, the kind that only children who'd survived together could share. We believe you, Clara said finally. But we're not running anymore. We're done being scared. If they want to take us, they'll have to fight all of us. Nate stared at her for a long moment. Then slowly he nodded. All right then. We fight together. The next week was a blur of preparation. Dan rode for Helena the morning after the attack, carrying letters from Nate to every judge, lawyer, and official who might listen. Kate Mercer made good on her promise, going door to door in town, speaking to anyone who would listen about what Cutter had done. The response surprised everyone. It started with small things. A pie left on the porch, no note attached. A bundle of warm clothes appearing by the gate. Then, people started coming in person. Farmers, shopkeepers, even the school teacher who Clara had assumed hated them. I heard what happened, Miss Patterson said, standing awkwardly in the Harlan parlor with a basket of books. I wanted you to know that not everyone in town agrees with Reverend Cutter. Could have fooled me, Clara muttered. Clara, Nate warned. No, she's right. Miss Patterson's face reddened. We haven't been welcoming. We've gossiped and judged and made assumptions based on nothing but our own small-mindedness. She set the basket down. I'm sorry. These are for the children, to help with their studies. After she left, Josie pounced on the books like they were made of gold. Sam examined them more cautiously, and Tommy immediately lost interest. But Emmy picked one up, a volume of frontier history, and began reading intently. Why are they being nice now? Josie asked, not looking up from a collection of fairy tales. Because they finally saw what Cutter really is, Nate said. What is he really? A man who cares more about power than people. Nate sat down heavily. He's been trying to control this town for years. The orphan placements are just part of it. He gets money from the church for every child he places. The worse the placement, the more desperate families become, the more they donate. So we're just profit to him. You were. Not anymore. Clara watched Nate's face, saw the exhaustion there. He'd barely slept since the attack, patrolling the property at night, checking locks and windows, jumping at every sound. You should rest, she said. I'll rest when I know you're safe. We're never going to be completely safe. That's not how the world works. Nate looked at her, something shifting in his expression. When did you get so wise? When life stopped giving me any other choice. He didn't have an answer for that. The court date came faster than expected. Dan returned from Helena with news Judge Crane, a circuit judge known for his fairness, had agreed to hear the case. Cutter's original order from Judge Whitfield had been suspended pending review. They had 2 weeks to prepare, 2 weeks to gather evidence, 2 weeks to find witnesses, 2 weeks to prove that 5 broken children were better off with a broken rancher than in the hands of a corrupt preacher. It's not enough time, Nate said, pacing the parlor. Kate had come over to help strategize. Cutter's had months to prepare. He's got money connections, the church behind him. And what do you have? Kate asked. 5 kids and a ranch. You have more than that. Kate caught his arm, stopped his pacing. You have the truth. You have people who've seen what you've done for these children. And you have me. Something passed between them. Clara, watching from the doorway, felt like an intruder. I can't ask you to. You're not asking, I'm offering. Kate's voice was firm. I've watched you, Nate. Watched you transform from the loneliest man in Wyoming into someone who has something to live for. These children did that. You did that. I'm not going to let some greedy preacher destroy it. Nate was silent for a long moment. Then he took Kate's hand, held it gently. Thank you. Clara slipped away before they noticed her. She had her own preparations to make. She found Emmy in the barn, sitting with the gray horse that had become her refuge. I need to talk to you, Clara said. Emmy didn't look up. About the trial. About what you said. When Cutter came. About the man at the orphanage. Emmy's hands stilled on the horse's mane. They're going to ask about our past, Clara continued. About what happened to us before. If you testify, I'll tell them everything. Are you sure it'll be hard? They'll make you say it in front of strangers. They might not believe you. Emmy finally looked up. Her gray eyes were ancient, far too old for her 6-year-old face. Clara, I've been not believed my whole life. One more time won't break me. She paused. Will you be there when I tell it? I'll be right beside you, the whole time. Emmy nodded once. Then she went back to brushing the horse, and Clara left her to her silence. The night before the trial, Clara couldn't sleep. She crept downstairs, expecting to find the house dark and quiet. Instead, she found Nate at the kitchen table, a single candle burning, papers spread before him. You should be resting, she said. So should you. She sat down across from him. What are you reading? Testimonials. Kate collected them from people in town. He pushed a stack toward her. Read them. Clara picked up the first letter, then the second, then the third. They were stories. Stories about Nate, how he'd helped a farmer rebuild after a fire, given extra pay to workers during hard winters, quietly paid medical bills for families who couldn't afford them. I didn't know you did any of this, Clara said. Wasn't for show. Just seemed like the right thing to do. These could help. Maybe. Nate gathered the letters. But it's not really about me. It's about you kids. Whether you're better off here or somewhere else. We're better off here. The judge might not see it that way. A bachelor with no experience, no wife, no proper family structure. Family isn't about structure. Clara's voice was fierce. Family is about who shows up, who stays, who fights for you even when it's hard. Nate looked at her for a long moment. When did you start believing that? Clara thought about the question. When had she stopped waiting for disappointment? When had she started trusting this strange, sad man who'd bought 5 orphans and tried so hard to learn how to love them? I don't know, she admitted. Somewhere between Tommy's nightmares and Emmy's knife and you saying my daughter, like it was the most natural thing in the world. I meant it. I know. Clara reached across the table, covered his hand with hers. That's why we're going to win tomorrow. Because you mean it. Because you chose us when you didn't have to. Because for the first time in my life, I believe someone when they say they won't give up. Nate's eyes glistened in the candlelight. Clara Mae Dawson, he said quietly, you are the strongest person I've ever known. I had to be, but maybe... She paused, searching for words. Maybe now I can learn how to be something else too. Something softer, because I finally have someone to catch me if I fall. They sat in silence as the candle burned down 2 broken people who'd found each other in the wreckage of their separate lives. Tomorrow would bring the fight of their lives. But tonight, they had each other. And for the first time, that felt like enough. The courtroom smelled like old wood and cold fear. Clara sat on a bench behind Nate, her siblings pressed close on either side. Tommy had refused to let go of her hand since they'd arrived. Sam was pale and silent. Josie kept her eyes fixed on the floor. And Emmy. Emmy watched everything with those gray eyes cataloging exits, counting enemies preparing for the worst. Judge Elijah Crane took his seat at the front of the room, his face revealing nothing. He was older than Clara had expected, with silver hair and deep lines carved by decades of hard decisions. His eyes moved slowly across the room, taking in every face, every tension, every unspoken word. This court is now in session. His voice was quiet, but carried. The matter before us is the custody of 5 minor children currently residing with Mr. Nathaniel Harlan. Reverend Jonas Cutter has petitioned to have these children removed and placed in church custody pending adoption. Mr. Harlan contests this petition. Cutter sat at one table flanked by a lawyer in an expensive suit. He looked calm, confident, righteous. The kind of man who believed God was on his side and acted accordingly. Nate sat at the other table alone. He'd refused to hire a lawyer, said he couldn't afford to put his trust in someone else's words. Kate Mercer sat in the gallery, along with Miss Patterson, Margaret Brennan, and a dozen other townspeople who'd come to show support. It wasn't enough. Clara knew it wasn't enough. "Reverend Cutter," Judge Crane said, "you may present your case." Cutter stood smoothing his black coat. "Your Honor, this is a simple matter of propriety and child welfare. Mr. Harlan, while wealthy, is a bachelor with no experience raising children. He lives alone on a remote ranch with no wife, no female presence to guide young girls through the complexities of womanhood." He paused, letting the words sink in. "Furthermore, Mr. Harlan acquired these children through unorthodox means. He paid $250 at a public placement fair, essentially purchasing them like livestock. This is not adoption. This is commerce. And commerce has no place in the sacred responsibility of raising children." Clara's hands clenched into fists. Tommy whimpered beside her. "The church offers these children structure, education, moral guidance. We have facilities designed specifically for orphaned youth. We have trained staff who understand their needs." Cutter's voice oozed sincerity. "Mr. Harlan, whatever his intentions, simply cannot provide what these children require." Judge Crane nodded slowly. "Mr. Harlan, your response?" Nate stood. His hands were steady, but Clara could see the tension in his shoulders. "Your Honor, I'm not going to pretend I know what I'm doing. When I stepped onto that platform 3 weeks ago, I didn't have a plan. I saw 5 children being torn apart by strangers who wanted to use them, and I couldn't walk away." He paused, gathering himself. "The Reverend is right that I'm a bachelor. Right that I live alone. Right that I paid money to take these children home. But he's wrong about what that means." "Explain." "I didn't buy these children, Your Honor. I bought their freedom. Freedom from being separated, sold off to different families who saw them as cheap labor instead of human beings. Freedom from a system that treats orphans like merchandise." Nate's voice hardened. "I've seen what happens to children placed through the Reverend's program. Worked to death on farms, beaten for small mistakes. Worse things that I won't speak aloud in mixed company." Cutter shot to his feet. "Objection. These are baseless accusations." "Sit down, Reverend." Judge Crane's voice was ice. "You'll have your chance to respond." Mr. Harlan continued. "I don't have a wife," Nate admitted, "but I have Mrs. Agnes Whitmore, who's helped run my household for 15 years and has raised 3 children of her own. I have Kate Mercer, my neighbor, who's been visiting daily to help with the children's education. I have an entire community." He gestured at the gallery. "Who've come forward to support these children despite the Reverend's attempts to turn them against us." He turned to look at Clara and her siblings. And I have 5 of the bravest, strongest, most resilient people I've ever met. They don't need me to save them. They've already saved themselves 100 times over. All I'm doing is giving them a safe place to keep doing it. Judge Crane was silent for a long moment. Then he said, "I'd like to hear from the children." Clara's heart stopped. "Your Honor," Cutter interjected, "surely you can't expect to take the word of children over, 'I can and I will.'" The judge's gaze was sharp. "These are the people whose lives we're deciding. They have a right to speak." He looked at Clara. "You're the oldest. Clara Mae Dawson, is that correct?" Clara stood on shaking legs. "Yes, sir." "Come forward." She walked to the front of the courtroom, feeling every eye on her. Nate gave her a small nod as she passed Trust, Encouragement, Faith. She sat in the witness chair, her hands clasped tight in her lap. "Miss Dawson," Judge Crane said, "tell me about your life before Mr. Harlan." Clara swallowed. "I had parents once. My father worked in a printing factory in Boston. My mother was a seamstress. They were good people, kind people. What happened to them? My father got caught in a machine. It crushed his arm and the infection killed him 2 weeks later." Clara's voice stayed flat, controlled. "My mother couldn't work enough to support us alone. She got sick. The fever took her 6 months after Papa. And then, St. Catherine's Orphanage. 2 years of sharing a bed with 3 other girls, eating food that was more water than substance, being told every day that we were burdens. Charity cases. Lucky to be alive." Judge Crane's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. "Then the train brought us west. They told us we'd find families, good homes. Instead, we found auctions where farmers poked at us like cattle, and Reverend Cutter—" She stopped herself, took a breath. "Reverend Cutter told us to be grateful anyone wanted us at all. And Mr. Harlan—" Clara looked at Nate, really looked at him. "Mr. Harlan didn't poke or prod. He didn't ask how much work we could do or whether we'd cause trouble. He asked if we wanted to come with him. He gave us a choice." Her voice cracked slightly. "Nobody had ever given us a choice before." "Has he been good to you?" "He's been better than good. He sat with my little brother during nightmares. He let my sister Emmy have space when she needed it instead of forcing her to perform gratitude. He's learning how to braid Josie's hair because he noticed she missed having someone do it. He's—" Clara struggled for words. "He's trying. Every day he's trying. That's more than anyone else has ever done for us." "Thank you, Miss Dawson." Judge Crane turned to Cutter. "Your witness." Cutter stood, his smile predatory. "Miss Dawson, you seem very articulate for a 10-year-old. Almost rehearsed, one might say." "Nobody rehearsed me." "Of course not." Cutter circled closer. "Tell me, did Mr. Harlan ever explain why he really took you in? A wealthy bachelor with no family suddenly acquiring 5 children seems unusual, don't you think? He told us about his brother, Daniel, the one who died in the snow." Something flickered across Cutter's face. He hadn't expected that. "So you're aware that Mr. Harlan has a history of loss, of failure. He couldn't save his own brother, and now he's trying to ease his guilt by playing savior to you unfortunate waifs." Clara's temper flared. "That's not— Isn't that exactly what's happening? A damaged man using damaged children to make himself feel better?" "No." Clara's voice was steel. "What's happening is a good man trying to do the right thing, something you wouldn't understand." "I understand more than you know, child." Cutter leaned closer. "I understand that you're protecting him because you're afraid. Afraid that if you tell the truth about what really happens in that house, you'll be thrown back into the system. Afraid that—" "Nothing happens in that house." Clara was on her feet now, shaking with rage. "Nothing except kindness and patience, and people actually caring whether we live or die. You want to talk about what happens in houses? Let's talk about the placements you made. Reverend, let's talk about the Miller farm, where Johnny Thompson lost 3 fingers to frostbite. Because they made him sleep in the barn. Let's talk about the Hendricks family who beat Mary Sullivan so badly she couldn't walk for a week. Let's talk about... That's enough. Judge Crane's voice cut through her fury. Miss Dawson, please sit down. Reverend Cutter, control your questioning, or I'll find you in contempt. Clara sank back into the chair, her whole body trembling. She'd gone too far. She'd ruined everything. But when she looked at Judge Crane, she didn't see anger. She saw something else entirely. I'd like to hear from the other children, he said quietly. One at a time. Sam went next. He spoke in a voice barely above a whisper, telling the judge about his fear of loud noises since watching their father die. About how Nate had noticed and started warning him before making sudden sounds. About feeling safe for the first time since Boston. Josie talked about books and libraries and how Nate let her read anything she wanted instead of telling her girls shouldn't fill their heads with stories. About Mrs. Whitmore teaching her to cook and Kate Mercer lending her novels about brave women who had adventures. Tommy couldn't stop crying long enough to speak coherently, but his desperate grip on his ragged blanket and the way he kept looking at Nate said more than words could. Then it was Emmy's turn. She walked to the witness chair like she was walking to an execution. Small and pale, her dark hair braided neatly, her gray eyes fixed on some distant point. Miss Emmy, Judge Crane said gently. Do you have a last name? No, sir. I was left at the orphanage without papers. They just called me Emmy. Do you remember anything about your life before the orphanage? Emmy was quiet for a long moment. I remember a woman with gray eyes like mine. I think she was my mother. And I remember a man talking about mountains, about a ranch where horses ran free. Clara saw Nate stiffen. But mostly, Emmy continued, I remember being alone and scared and learning that if you want to survive, you can't trust anyone. Has that changed? Emmy looked at Nate. Something passed between them. Recognition, maybe. Connection. I'm learning, she said softly. Mr. Harlan doesn't make promises he can't keep. He doesn't pretend everything is fine when it isn't. He tells the truth even when it's hard. She paused. I trust him. I don't trust many people, but I trust him. Cutter stood for cross-examination, but his confidence had visibly cracked. Emmy, you said you don't remember your family. Is it possible that Mr. Harlan has manipulated your memories? Convinced you to? Nobody manipulates me. Emmy's voice was ice. I see things clearly, more clearly than most adults. She turned those gray eyes on Cutter. I see you, Reverend. I see what you really are. Ah. And what is that? A man who uses God's name to hurt children. Emmy didn't flinch. I've known men like you. They smile and speak softly and pretend to care, but underneath they only care about power, about control, about making themselves feel big by making others feel small. The courtroom went absolutely silent. I see you, Emmy repeated, and I'm not afraid of you anymore. Judge Crane called a recess. Clara found her siblings in the hallway, huddled together like they'd done at the auction. Nate stood apart, talking quietly with Kate. His face was pale drawn. Did I ruin it? Clara asked, approaching him. When I lost my temper. You were magnificent. Nate pulled her into a hug, surprising them both. All of you were. Whatever happens next, I'm proud of you. What do you think will happen? Nate didn't answer. He didn't have to. The uncertainty in his eyes said everything. They filed back into the courtroom an hour later. Judge Crane took his seat, his expression unreadable. I've heard testimony from both sides, he said. I've reviewed the documentation provided by Reverend Cutter and the character witnesses provided by Mr. Harlan. I've listened to 5 children speak about their experiences with remarkable honesty and courage. He paused, letting the silence stretch. Custody matters are never simple. We must balance the welfare of the children against societal norms, religious considerations, and practical concerns. Reverend Cutter raises valid points about Mr. Harlan's unconventional situation. Clara's heart sank. However, Judge Crane leaned forward. I am also compelled to consider the testimony of the children themselves. These are not infants incapable of understanding their circumstances. These are young people who have survived hardship that would break many adults. They have formed clear opinions about their situation, and those opinions deserve weight. He looked directly at Cutter. Furthermore, I am troubled by certain aspects of the Reverend's petition. The original court order from Judge Whitfield has been rescinded pending investigation into irregularities in his rulings. Several former placements made through the church's program have come forward with disturbing allegations that are now being examined by territorial authorities. Cutter's face went white. Mr. Harlan's methods may be unorthodox, but I find no evidence of harm to these children. On the contrary, every witness, including the children themselves, testified to improvement in their circumstances since entering his care. Judge Crane straightened in his chair. It is therefore the ruling of this court that the custody petition filed by Reverend Jonas Cutter is denied. The 5 minor children known as Clara Mae Dawson, Samuel Dawson, Josephine Bell, Thomas Reed, and Emmy shall remain in the legal guardianship of Nathaniel Harlan. Clara couldn't breathe. Furthermore, the judge continued, I am recommending that territorial authorities conduct a full investigation into the placement practices of Reverend Cutter and his associated organizations. Until such investigation is complete, all placement activities are suspended. The courtroom erupted. People were cheering, crying, shouting. Cutter was on his feet, face purple with rage, but his lawyer was already pulling him toward the door. Clara felt arms around her, her siblings, Mrs. Whitmore Kate. And then Nate was there, kneeling in front of them, his eyes bright with tears. He wasn't quite shedding. We won, Josie breathed. We actually won. We won, Nate confirmed. You're staying, all of you, forever. Tommy launched himself at Nate, wrapping small arms around his neck. Sam followed, then Josie. Even Emmy moved closer, letting herself be pulled into the embrace. Clara stood apart for just a moment, watching, letting herself believe. Then Nate looked at her, held out his hand, and she took it. Welcome home, he said. For real this time. The celebration lasted well into the evening. Back at the ranch, Mrs. Whitmore had prepared a feast. Kate stayed for dinner, sitting beside Nate in a way that suggested more than neighborly concern. The townspeople who'd come to the trial drifted in and out, bringing food, offering congratulations, apologizing for years of cold shoulders and whispered judgment. Through it all, Clara watched her family. Her real family, the one they'd built from broken pieces, and felt something unfamiliar settling in her chest. Peace. After the younger children had been put to bed, Clara found Nate on the porch, staring out at the snow-covered land. Can't sleep, she asked. Too much to think about. She stood beside him, following his gaze. The stars were brilliant tonight, scattered across the black sky like scattered diamonds. Emmy asked me something earlier, Nate said quietly. About her past, about whether I knew anything. Clara's breath caught. What did you tell her? The truth. That I have suspicions but no proof. That my brother Daniel had a sweetheart from the Shoshone tribe. That the timing and the eyes and 100 small things add up to a possibility I can't ignore. Do you think she's really his daughter? Maybe. Probably. Nate's voice was rough. Which would make her my niece. My blood family. Does it matter? You said blood doesn't make family. It doesn't, but it matters to Emmy. She wants to belong somewhere. To someone. He finally looked at Clara. I told her that whether or not we share blood, she's mine. They're all mine. That's what matters. Clara nodded slowly. What did she say? She said that was enough. Nate almost smiled. Then she asked if she could keep sleeping in the barn sometimes, because the horses make her feel safe. Did you say yes? I said she could do whatever she needed, as long as she comes home for dinner. They stood in comfortable silence, the cold air sharp in their lungs. "Kate's nice," Clara said eventually. Nate's expression flickered. "She is. She looks at you like you're worth looking at." "Clara." "I'm just saying." Clara shrugged. "We wouldn't mind. If you wanted to, you know, not be alone anymore. In that way." Nate was quiet for a long time. When he spoke, his voice was thick. "One thing at a time. First we get you kids settled. Get Emmy's story figured out. Get Sam comfortable enough to sleep through the night. Get Tommy to stop hiding food under his mattress." "He still does that." "Old habits." Nate sighed. "They take time to break. But we've got time now. All the time in the world." Clara leaned against him just slightly. He put an arm around her shoulders. "Thank you," she said, "for fighting for us. Thank you for letting me." They stayed there until the cold drove them inside two people who'd found each other against impossible odds. And for the first time in Clara Mae Dawson's young life, the future didn't feel like something to fear. It felt like something to hope for. Spring came slow that year, melting the snow inch by stubborn inch until patches of brown earth appeared like promises. Clara marked the seasons by changes in her family. Tommy stopped hiding food under his mattress sometime in February after Mrs. Whitmore caught him, and instead of punishing him, simply started leaving extra biscuits on his nightstand. Sam began speaking in full sentences again, his nightmares fading from nightly terrors to occasional disturbances. Josie devoured every book in Nate's library and started writing stories of her own, filling notebooks with tales of brave orphans who found homes. And Emmy bloomed in ways none of them had expected. The truth about her past came out piece by piece, like a puzzle assembling itself. An old Shoshone woman who traded at the general store recognized something in Emmy's face and asked questions. Letters were sent. Answers trickled back. Daniel Harlan had indeed loved a Shoshone girl named Morning Star. They'd planned to marry in secret, run away together to California, where nobody would care about the color of their skin or the tribes of their ancestors. But Daniel died in that blizzard before they could escape. Morning Star, pregnant and alone, had been sent away by her family in shame. She'd died giving birth to a daughter with gray eyes and dark hair. That daughter had been left at an orphanage by a distant relative who couldn't afford another mouth to feed. No papers, no name, just Emmy. Nate received the news in his study alone. Clara found him there an hour later, sitting in the dark, a letter crumpled in his fist. "She's Daniel's," he said without looking up. "She's really his. Does it change anything?" "Everything and nothing." Nate finally raised his head. His eyes were red. "She's my blood, my brother's child, the family I thought I'd never have. She was already your family. I know. But now—" He smoothed out the letter, stared at it. "Now I can give her a name, a history, something to belong to." They told Emmy together, sitting in the kitchen with the rest of the children gathered around. Nate explained it carefully, who Daniel was, who Morning Star was, what had happened to both of them. Emmy listened without expression. When Nate finished, she was quiet for a long moment. "So I'm not nobody," she said finally. "You were never nobody. But now I know where I came from, who I came from." Emmy looked at her hands, small, pale, trembling slightly. "I have a grandmother, the old woman at the store. She said she knew my mother. She wants to meet you, properly, when you're ready." "I'm ready now." That meeting happened 3 days later. Clara watched from a distance as Emmy approached the old Shoshone woman, watched as weathered hands cupped Emmy's face, as tears fell from eyes that had seen too much loss. "You have her spirit," the old woman said. "Morning Star. She was fierce like you, quiet but fierce." Emmy didn't cry. She never cried. But she let herself be held, and that was more than she'd allowed anyone before. The adoption papers were filed in April. All 5 children legally and permanently bound to Nathaniel Harlan. The judge who'd saved them, Elijah Crane, officiated the ceremony himself. "Raise your right hands," he said, a hint of smile on his weathered face. 5 hands went up. Nate's went up too. "Do you, Nathaniel James Harlan, swear to provide for these children, to protect them, to guide them, to love them as your own flesh and blood for as long as you shall live?" "I do." "And do you, Clara May Samuel Josephine Thomas and Emmeline, accept Nathaniel Harlan as your father, to honor him, to trust him, to allow him into your hearts as family?" Clara answered first. "I do." The others followed, even Tommy, who had to be prompted by Josie. "Then, by the authority vested in me, I declare you a family. Legal binding and—" Judge Crane's voice softened. "Well deserved." Clara had thought she'd feel different after. Lighter maybe, more complete. Instead, she just felt right. Like a bone that had been out of joint for years, finally clicking back into place. Summer brought growth in more ways than one. The ranch thrived under Nate's care, but now there were small hands helping Sam, learning to gentle horses, Clara riding fence lines beside Dan, even Tommy contributing by collecting eggs from the chicken coop Mrs. Whitmore had insisted they needed. Emmy spent her days between the barn and her grandmother's lodge, learning the language and traditions of her mother's people. She came home each evening with new words, new stories, new pieces of an identity she was building from the ground up. And Kate Mercer came around more and more often, her visits stretching from afternoons to evenings, to the occasional dinner that turned into the occasional overnight stay in the guest room. Clara noticed. They all noticed. But nobody said anything until Josie Blunt, as always, asked over breakfast one morning, "Are you and Miss Kate going to get married?" Nate choked on his coffee. "Josie?" Clara hissed. "What?" "It's a fair question. She's here all the time. She looks at Papa like Mama used to look at our real Papa. And last week I saw them holding hands in the barn." Kate, who'd been helping Mrs. Whitmore with the dishes, went very still. Nate set down his cup with careful precision. "That's a conversation for adults. We're part of this family too." Sam's voice was quiet but firm. "If something's changing, we should know about it." The silence stretched. Clara watched Nate and Kate exchange a look, the kind of look that held entire conversations. "You're right," Nate said finally. "You should know." He reached across the table, took Kate's hand. "Kate and I have been getting to know each other, as more than friends, more than neighbors. And," Josie pressed, "and I've asked her to marry me." Tommy's eyes went wide. "Does that mean we'll have a mama?" Kate knelt beside his chair, her expression soft. "Only if you want one. I would never try to replace anyone. But I would very much like to be part of this family, if you'll have me." Clara watched her siblings process this. Sam looked uncertain. Josie looked delighted. Tommy looked like he might cry. Emmy's expression was unreadable. "Clara." Nate's voice was careful. "You're the oldest. Your opinion matters." Clara thought about the past 6 months, about Kate teaching her to ride properly, helping with homework, sitting up with her during a nightmare when Nate was away checking cattle, about the way Kate looked at all of them, not with pity or obligation, but with genuine affection. "Do you love him?" she asked Kate directly. "Very much. Do you love us, all of us, even when we're difficult?" "Especially when you're difficult." Kate's smile was warm. "You're the most remarkable children I've ever known. I would be honored to call you mine." Clara looked at her siblings. Some unspoken vote passed between them. "Okay," she said. "Welcome to the family." The wedding was small, held at the ranch in early autumn, when the aspens turned gold. Clara served as maid of honor, a concept she'd had to have explained to her, never having attended a wedding before. Sam and Tommy stood beside Nate as groomsmen. Josie scattered flower petals down the makeshift aisle. Emmy watched from the front row, her grandmother beside her, 2 families merging into one. Judge Crane officiated again, joking that he was becoming the Harlan family's personal justice of the peace. Kate wore a simple cream dress that Mrs. Whitmore had helped her make. Nate wore his best suit, the one he'd worn to the custody hearing, now associated with better memories. When they exchanged vows, Clara noticed something she'd never seen before. Nate was crying. Not sobbing, just quiet tears tracking down his weathered cheeks. "I spent 25 years thinking I didn't deserve happiness," he said, his voice rough. "That losing Daniel meant I had to spend my life alone punishing myself for a mistake I couldn't undo. Then 5 children fell into my life and taught me that family isn't about blood or deserving. It's about choosing each other, every day, over and over." He looked at Kate, then at the children. "I choose you, all of you, for the rest of my life." The kiss that followed made Tommy giggle and Josie sigh dreamily. Clara just smiled, a real smile, the kind she'd forgotten she was capable of. The years that followed weren't always easy. There were still nightmares, Tommy's fires, Sam's factory machines, Clara's auction platforms. There were arguments and growing pains, and the inevitable friction of 7 people learning to live together. There was the terrible winter when Josie caught pneumonia, and they thought they might lose her. There was the summer Sam ran away after a fight with Nate and didn't come back for 3 days. But there was also joy. So much joy. Clara learned to read the land like Nate did, to see weather coming in the way clouds moved, to understand the rhythm of cattle and seasons. By 15, she could run the ranch operations nearly as well as Dan. By 17, she was making decisions that affected the entire property. Sam found his voice through animals. He had a gift for understanding horses that bordered on supernatural, and by 16, he was training them for ranches across the territory. The boy who'd once flinched at loud noises now stood calm in the middle of stampedes, his quiet presence settling even the most panicked creatures. Josie's stories found an audience. A publisher in Denver printed her first collection of frontier tales when she was 19, and suddenly the girl who'd devoured books was creating them. She dedicated the volume to Papa Nate, who taught me that the best stories are the ones we live. Tommy grew tall and strong, his fears slowly replaced by a fierce protectiveness of his family. He became Nate's shadow, learning everything the older man could teach, determined to carry on the Harlan legacy. And Emmy became a bridge between worlds. She split her time between the ranch and the Shoshone community, speaking both languages fluently, teaching her siblings the traditions of her mother's people while embracing the heritage of her father's. The silent girl who'd scared grown men with a kitchen knife became a young woman of remarkable grace and quiet power. Kate gave birth to twins when Clara was 16, a boy named Daniel and a girl named Rose. Suddenly, there were 2 more Harlans in the house, and the older children discovered they had opinions about diaper changing and midnight feedings. "This is your fault," Clara told Nate one exhausted morning after walking Rose for 3 hours while the baby screamed. "You wanted a big family." "I wanted you 5. The rest was a bonus." Nate took Rose from her arms, settling the infant with practiced ease. "Besides, you love them." Clara looked at her tiny half-sister finally asleep and felt her heart expand in ways she hadn't known were possible. "Yeah," she admitted, "I do." The moment Clara had been dreading came on her 18th birthday. She'd been offered a position at a law firm in Denver. Judge Crane had recommended her, said she had the sharpest mind he'd seen in 40 years on the bench. The firm would pay for her education train, her eventually let her practice alongside them. It was everything she'd never dared to dream of. It was also 800 miles from home. She found Nate in the barn, brushing down his favorite horse, the way he always did when he needed to think. "You heard," she said. "Kate told me." He didn't stop brushing. "Denver's a good opportunity." "I don't have to go." "Yes, you do." Now he stopped, turned to face her. "Clara, you've been taking care of other people since you were 8 years old. First your siblings, then this whole family. It's time to take care of yourself." "But the ranch?" "Has Sam and Tommy and Emmy and Kate and me. We'll manage." His voice softened. "This is what I wanted for you, all of you. Not just survival, but life. Real life with choices and opportunities and futures you get to build for yourself." Clara felt tears burning behind her eyes. What if I fail? Then you come home and we figure out something else. Nate crossed the barn, took her hands in his. Clara May Harlan, you are the bravest person I have ever known. You faced down men twice your size to protect your family. You testified in court against a corrupt preacher. You held this family together through things that would have broken anyone else. He squeezed her hands. Denver doesn't stand a chance against you. She left in September on a train heading east through the mountains. The whole family came to see her off. Nate and Kate, Mrs. Whitmore. Dan, all 4 siblings, even the twins, strapped to Kate's chest. Emmy's grandmother had sent a blessing bundle that now hung from Clara's carpet bag. Josie cried. Tommy tried not to, and failed. Sam hugged her so tight she thought her ribs might crack. Emmy simply pressed their foreheads together and said, "Come back strong. Come back soon." Nate was last. "I'm proud of you," he said quietly, so only she could hear. "I've been proud of you since the moment you slapped that farmer's hand away at the auction. But today, watching you choose your own path, choose to become something more than anyone ever expected you could be, this is the proudest I've ever been." "Papa." The word still felt strange in her mouth even after years of practice. "I wouldn't be here without you." "Yes, you would. Just somewhere different. Someone was always going to recognize what you are, Clara. I just got lucky enough to be first." The train whistle blew. Clara hugged him one last time, inhaling the scent of leather and horses, and home. Then she climbed aboard, found her seat, and watched through the window as her family grew smaller and smaller until the train rounded a bend and they disappeared. She didn't cry. She was too busy imagining the future. 20 years later, Clara Harlan stood in a courtroom in Denver facing down a factory owner who'd been working children to death in his textile mill. She thought about Tommy, who'd inherited the ranch and was raising it to new heights. About Sam, whose horse training operation spanned 3 states. About Josie, now a famous author living in New York with a husband and 4 children. About Emmy, who'd become a teacher on the reservation building bridges between cultures. She thought about Nate, older now, his hair white, his hands less steady, but his heart still the same. About Kate, grandmother to 14, still running the household with quiet efficiency. About Daniel and Rose, grown now, making their own marks on the world. She thought about a winter day 30 years ago when a 10-year-old girl had stood on an auction platform and fought grown men to keep her family together. When a broken rancher had stepped out of the crowd and changed everything with 2 words. How much she thought about what it meant to be chosen, to be wanted, to be loved not because of blood or obligation, but because someone looked at you and saw something worth saving. The factory owner's lawyer was still talking, making arguments about profit margins and economic necessity. Clara let him finish, then stood. "Your Honor, my opponent speaks of economic necessity, of the practical realities of running a business in this modern age." Her voice was calm, controlled, carrying. "But I speak for 27 children who worked 14-hour days in conditions that would shame a prison. I speak for the 3 who died because safety measures were too expensive to implement. I speak for every child who has ever been told they are less than human because they are small and powerless and have no one to fight for them." She looked at the factory owner, saw him flinch. "My client isn't just seeking damages. She's seeking recognition. Recognition that children are people, not machinery. That their lives have value beyond the labor they can provide. That in this country, in this century, we can do better than treating our most vulnerable citizens as disposable commodities." She paused, letting the words settle. "I was an orphan once, auctioned off in a Wyoming winter to whoever would pay for me. I know what it means to be seen as merchandise. And I know what it means to be saved by someone who refused to look away." Her voice strengthened. "We cannot look away, not anymore, not ever again." The verdict came back in her favor. It always did. Clara returned to Wyoming for Christmas that year, the same way she did every year. The train pulled into the station at dusk, and the whole family was waiting on the platform. Gray-haired Nate, leaning on Kate's arm, Tommy's children, running wild. Sam's quiet wife, holding their newborn Josie. Surrounded by her boisterous brood, Emmy, standing slightly apart, with her grandmother's blessing bundle still hanging from her belt after all these years. "You won again," Nate said as she stepped off the train. "Saw it in the papers." "I learned from the best." Flattery. But he was smiling that rare, real smile she'd learned to treasure. "Come on, Mrs. Whitmore's granddaughter made dinner. Turkey and all the fixings." They walked together toward the wagons, 3 generations of Harlans spilling across the platform. Clara watched her family, the one she'd been born into, and lost the one she'd built from broken pieces, and found siblings, the one that had grown and multiplied and spread across the country like roots seeking water. She thought about the scared little girl she'd been, the one who'd believed that hope was dangerous, that good things never lasted, that love was just another word for eventual loss. That girl had been wrong. "Papa," she said, slipping her hand into Nate's weathered one. "Yes. Thank you, for stepping forward, for not walking away." Nate squeezed her hand. His eyes, still gray, still kind, met hers. "Thank you for letting me." They climbed into the wagon surrounded by family heading home through the snow. And Clara May Harlan, who had once stood on an auction platform and whispered that nobody wanted her, finally understood the truth that had been waiting for her all along. She had never been unwanted. She had simply been waiting for the right person to see her worth. And when he came, he didn't just save her life. He gave her the courage to build one worth living. That was the gift Nathaniel Harlan had given 5 broken children on a winter day in Wyoming. Not just a home, not just a name, but the unshakable knowledge that they mattered, that they belonged, that somewhere in this vast and often cruel world there was a place for them, a family, forever.